crisp Friday evening, the heavy silence inside my home was shattered by a single sharp notification. My daughter-in-law, Brooke, had just uploaded a photo from her 5th wedding anniversary dinner. The image was pristine, but it was the caption that delivered the real blow. In bold, unapologetic letters, it read, "Family only. So incredibly blessed to finally have all my absolute favorites in one place." I sat in the dim light of my living room, staring at the glowing screen of my tablet. In the photograph, I could see my son, Julian, smiling broadly, completely at ease, seated beside his wife's entire extended family. Her parents, her siblings, even distant cousins I barely recognized. Everyone was laughing, raising crystal glasses of vintage wine at the most expensive upscale steakhouse in town. Everyone except me. I didn't burst into tears. I didn't feel the urge to type out a frantic, emotional paragraph exposing their cruelty. Instead, a cold, sharp, and absolute clarity washed over me. I calmly pressed the like button, paused for a few seconds, and then left one single, devastating comment under the picture. In that case, from now on, the family should also be the ones paying the family's bills. I set the tablet down on the wooden table. Exactly 5 minutes later, my phone began to violently vibrate. They were about to realize that my silence was never acceptance. It was a legal and financial boundary they were completely unprepared to face.
My name is Martha. I am 65 years old, a widow, and I live on the ground floor of a beautiful Connecticut duplex that I have fully owned and maintained for over 30 years. My son, Julian, and his wife, Brooke, live right above me, occupying the second unit upstairs. That night was supposed to be their milestone 5th anniversary. Just a few days prior, Brooke had casually mentioned in passing, while literally turning her back and walking away from me in the hallway, that I wasn't invited to the celebration. She had offered a flimsy, superficial excuse, claiming the reservation was incredibly tight and they wanted to keep the evening intimate. I had simply nodded, refusing to push myself into a space where I clearly wasn't wanted. I had made myself a quiet cup of tea and settled into my armchair, learning long ago after losing my husband 10 years ago to become friends with the quiet. But looking at that Facebook post changed everything. I was the woman who had spent the last 5 years quietly paying every single dime of the massive property tax bills, the water, the electricity, and the heating for the entire house. Yet apparently I didn't make the cut as family. Suddenly, the quiet vanished. Heavy, frantic footsteps came pounding down the wooden stairs from the upstairs unit. I took my time standing up. I deliberately walked over to my filing cabinet, pulled out a thick, well-documented folder, and placed it on the dining table before finally opening the front door. My son stood there breathless, looking at me with a mixture of embarrassment and rage. "Mom, what on earth is with that comment?" Julian barked, his voice cracking. "Brooke is literally crying hysterically in the car right now. Her entire family saw what you wrote. You need to delete it right this second." I looked at my son with absolute calmness. There was no anger in my eyes, just cold, hard facts. "Julian, I am not deleting a single word. It is the absolute truth." He stared at me as if I were speaking a completely foreign language. Julian had spent his entire marriage being a peace at any price kind of man, completely stepping back and letting Brooke steer their lives into entitlement. "You are completely ruining our anniversary night," he practically wailed. "No, Julian, you and your selected family clearly enjoyed your night to the absolute fullest," I replied, leaning steadily against the doorframe. "I am just tidying up my personal finances." I reached over, pulled the top sheet from my folder, and handed him the utility invoice for the last quarter. "Starting the 1st of next month, the electricity and water for the upstairs unit will be registered in your names. I have already officially revoked the autopay from my bank account." Julian looked as if the solid floor had just dropped out from under his feet. realizing the luxury of his free ride had just expired.
Julian stared at the financial numbers in his hand, his mouth opening and closing. "But why would you do this now?" he asked, his voice losing all its previous defensive edge. I gave him a very small, thin smile. "Because I finally realized that I am not considered family, Julian. And if I am not family, I should no longer be expected to carry the family's financial burdens." He opened his mouth to argue, to throw out another excuse, but the words simply wouldn't come. Deep down, he knew I was entirely right. But before he could even process the shock, the heavy front door of the main house slammed open with a deafening thud. Brooke had marched out of the car, stomping up the wooden porch steps in her expensive evening dress. She pushed past Julian, her face a tight mask of absolute fury and deep social embarrassment. "This is nothing but blackmail, Martha," she hissed, her eyes glaring into mine. I shook my head slowly, gripping the edge of my door and closing it halfway to firmly establish my boundary. "No, Brooke, this isn't blackmail. This is just adult life." The next morning, the entire duplex was wrapped in an eerie, deafening silence. But the real work was just about to begin. Usually, on a typical Saturday morning, I would hear Brooke's loud voice shouting something through the upstairs halls, or the heavy thud of their footsteps. But today, there was absolutely nothing. I sat peacefully at my kitchen table, taking my time to enjoy a hot cup of fresh coffee. For the first time in 5 years, it felt incredible to shed the invisible weight of financially maintaining 2 separate households. I hadn't been exaggerating or acting on a whim. I had kept these legal separation papers ready in my cabinet for weeks. Brooke's blatant disrespect hadn't occurred overnight. It had crept into our lives slowly, like a cold draft under a door, until she eventually began viewing my immense generosity as her absolute birthright. Right around noon, a large commercial service van pulled into my gravel driveway. I had scheduled a professional technician from the utility company days ago to physically alter the infrastructure of the house. As I unlocked the basement door and led the technician down into the concrete cellar, the door at the top of the stairs flew open with immense force. Brooke stood at the top of the landing, wrapped tightly in her bathrobe, looking down into the darkness. "What is going on down there?" she demanded, her voice echoing off the walls. I didn't even look up as the technician pulled out his heavy tools to permanently split the electrical grid of the house. "The technician is physically setting up your own independent utility meter," I replied calmly from the bottom of the stairs, keeping my eyes fixed on the technician's progress. "From today onward, you will pay exactly for what you consume." Brooke ran down the stairs, her slippers clicking loudly against the concrete, until she stood right in front of me, her face pale with utter disbelief. "You cannot do this to us. We have not budgeted for an extra monthly expense like this at all." I turned my body fully toward her, matching her gaze. "You have lived under my roof, completely rent-free, for 5 whole years, Brooke. Budgeting for your own lights, running water, and heating is the absolute bare minimum of being a functioning adult. You are a highly educated, smart woman. I am completely sure you will figure it out." She glared at me, her fists clenching. "This is entirely unfair. You are actively punishing us just because I wanted a small, private anniversary dinner with my loved ones." I took one slow, deliberate step closer to her. "I am not punishing anyone, Brooke. I am simply adjusting my monthly expenses to perfectly match my current status in your life. If you choose to treat me like a stranger, then you will pay your bills exactly like a stranger." She spun around on her heel and fled back upstairs. But Monday morning was about to bring phase 2 of her reality check. By Monday morning, the perfect, unblemished facade they had spent years maintaining upstairs was completely cracking. Through the thin floorboards of my ceiling, I could hear the muffled, chaotic sounds of them arguing for the first time in a very long time. But I wasn't distracted. Phase 2 of my boundary reclamation was already in motion. Over the past 5 years, Brooke had systematically annexed my backyard. Her expensive, oversized patio furniture completely blocked my absolute favorite spot under the old cherry tree, a tree my late husband and I had planted together. Whenever she had her friends or family over, I felt like a literal prisoner in my own home, forcing myself to stay indoors just so I wouldn't intrude on her space. That era of self-inflicted isolation ended today. While Brooke was at her corporate job and Julian was locked in his room upstairs, completely trapped on a mandatory Zoom call, I hired 2 local college kids looking for quick cash. Carefully pick up every single piece of her outdoor lounge set, I instructed them, pointing to the sprawling sectional. Do not scratch anything. Just haul it all up the exterior stairs and place it neatly on their private second-story deck. It wasn't an act of destruction. It was a peaceful redistribution of property. Once the space was completely cleared, I went to the local garden center. I purchased 2 beautiful high-end white Adirondack chairs and a small, elegant teak side table. I placed them exactly where her furniture used to sit. To finish it off, I had the boys install an elegant, solid wooden privacy screen right down the middle of the yard, permanently separating my patio from the path leading to their stairs. When Brooke pulled into the driveway later that afternoon, the sharp, rhythmic click-clack of her high heels stopped dead in the gravel. She stood frozen, staring at the brand new privacy screen and my clean, minimalist setup. "Where on earth is my furniture, Martha?" she asked, her voice trembling with an equal mix of confusion and building rage. I slowly turned the page of my hardcover book, taking a calm sip of chilled Chardonnay right under the shade of my cherry tree. "I had it carefully moved up to your private deck upstairs," I replied smoothly. "The backyard belongs exclusively to the ground floor unit. I've decided I'd like to finally enjoy my summer in absolute peace." "But we always grill down here," she protested, her hands gesturing wildly to the empty grass. "And you still can," I said, looking up with a polite, vacant smile. "Right up on your own deck. In fact, you'll have much more privacy up there for those family-only milestones." She opened her mouth to shout, realized she had no legal leg to stand on, and stormed inside, slamming the heavy wooden door so hard my windows rattled. By Wednesday morning, I moved to the next item on my list, the basement laundry room. Since the day they moved in, Brooke had treated my high-end, commercial-grade washer and dryer like her personal property. She would routinely leave her wet clothes rotting in the drum for days, or text me to just pop her stuff in the dryer because I was already downstairs. Respect is the only currency I deal in now, and Brooke was entirely bankrupt. I walked into the basement, completely ignored her messy blouses and Julian's dirty gym gear strewn across my folding table, and pulled a heavy-duty industrial plug lock out of my toolbox. In less than 2 minutes, the main power cord of the washing machine was locked tight into a plastic steel casing, and the only key was resting deep inside my apron pocket. On Thursday night, the frantic, heavy footsteps returned to the basement stairs. I heard Brooke's muffled voice calling out for Julian in a panic, followed by the sound of them inspecting the appliances. I calmly walked out into the lower hallway just as Julian stood staring at the locked machine in absolute bewilderment. "Mom, did you seriously put a physical lock on the washing machine?" Julian asked, looking at me with a desperate, exhausted expression. "Brooke has a massive corporate meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m., and she needs her tailored suit washed right now." I leaned comfortably against the wooden banister, crossing my arms. "I did, Julian. I noticed the machine was starting to make a strange grinding noise from severe overuse. Since we are officially operating as 2 completely separate households now, you should probably look into purchasing your own set." "But where the hell are we supposed to do our laundry tonight?" Julian yelled, throwing his hands in the air. "There is an incredibly reliable, clean 24-hour laundromat just 3 blocks down the street," I suggested with a helpful nod. Brooke stepped out from behind his shoulder, her face tomato red with pure, unadulterated rage. "You are doing this entirely on purpose. You are actively trying to evict us and kick us out onto the street." I looked her dead in the eye, my voice dropping into a cold, steady register. "No, Brooke. I am simply taking exclusive care of my own personal property.
If you love the luxury of your independence so much, you have to actually pay for it. Saturday morning arrived, bringing with it a brutal, unforgettable lesson in basic self-sufficiency. For the last 5 years, it had been an unwritten, highly abused rule that I handled the massive weekly grocery run for both units. I would completely stock the extra stainless steel refrigerator in the basement with prime cuts of steak, fresh organic produce, and cases of Brooke's favorite expensive sparkling water. They would simply slide downstairs in the middle of the night and help themselves whenever they were hungry, never once offering a single dollar toward the bill. But this Saturday morning, my shopping cart at the supermarket stayed incredibly light. I bought exactly what I needed for myself: a single beautiful piece of fresh salmon, some organic asparagus, and one nice bottle of French wine. When I got home, I went straight to the basement. I systematically emptied every remaining item from the secondary fridge, scrubbed the interior down with bleach until it was immaculate, and pulled the heavy black plug straight out of the wall outlet. I left the appliance doors propped wide open to let it air out. That evening around 7 p.m., I heard the basement door open upstairs. I heard Brooke's footsteps heading down, likely looking to steal a free bottle of wine for their dinner. A moment later, she was standing at my apartment door, aggressively rattling the brass handle. It didn't budge. I had started locking my door at all times. I opened it slowly, peering through the gap. "Is there a problem, Brooke?" She gasped for air, looking at me as if I had personally robbed her in broad daylight.